Kind of a big picture question, really. What adjustments does Notre Dame have to make in 2021 to average 200 rushing yards per game?
John,
That's
honestly,
interesting.
yeah. So to begin, Vince, I'm not a big fan of looking at the standard. You have to rush for X number of yards per game.
Right.
I'm just not. For me, when I look at it, it's a situation where if you look at the last two national champions, they didn't rush for 200 yards a game. Alabama was at 183, and LSU, I believe, I'm looking it up right now, but I believe they were in the 160s for rushing. Yeah, they were at 166.8. What I'm looking for, and to me, what balance is for me.
I'm interested to hear what you say to this.
Balance for me is that you're efficient and explosive in every phase of the game. And that doesn't just mean run versus pass. That means running inside and running outside. It means when you're passing, it means screen game, quick game, intermediate, and deep throwing. You have to be efficient and explosive in all areas to truly be a balanced offense. So I don't know if I care that Notre Dame rushes for 200 yards a game. If they're over 5 yards a carry, that's more of what I care about. I care about the fact that when the elite teams that you play can take away one part of your game, can you win with that other part?
Sure.
That, to me, is the bigger question about the rushing offense next season as opposed to 200 yards. Because if you go out and throw for 450 because the other team can't guard you and they're putting 8 in the box, I don't care if you ran for 120 yards. You know what I mean? Because they are trying to take away your run game, and so you just threw for 1,000,000 yards and you won by 30 points. So that's going to drag your average down. So for me, it's more about I don't know what this offense is going to have to do to be more efficient and explosive in the run game is have a better balance of declared runs versus misdirection runs. Declared runs essentially are runs where everybody's kind of going in the same direction. Okay, inside zone, outside zone, stretch plays, things like that, Vince, right?
Yep.
Even power plays, play side gap schemes like power are, to me, are declared runs because essentially, you're kind of working in a direction compared to, what I view as not undeclared runs, which are, you may have half the guys going this way and then half the guys going the other way. You may show buck sweep action this way, but you're actually running the opposite direction. Counter concepts, wrap schemes, things like that. I think they're going to need to mix up some of that stuff because they're not going to be able to, with this offensive line, to just line up and blow you up off the ball. There's going to be a little bit more creativity from a schematic standpoint. There's going to have to be a little bit more creativity from a formation alignment standpoint. Vince, this is also a huge, big reason why we have said that Notre Dame needs to improve its perimeter passing attack. Now, perimeter passing attack relative to the run game is perimeter screens, quick game, outside concepts that are partly RPOs, but also just normal pass concepts. Because if my team's playing your team, Vince, even if we're not running RPOs, if I'm beating you all day with bubble screens and quick outs and flood concepts and back shoulder throws and things where I'm beating you to the perimeter consistently because you're tucked inside to defend the run, I may not run for 85 yards, but I'm going to have about 120 yards worth of perimeter screens and perimeter quick throws because I'm constantly out leveraging you. Now, your reaction is to either A, keep letting me do it, or B, you got to widen out your look, or you're going to bring the corners up to defend it. Well, now if you bring the corners up, now I'm going to be able to have more success with you vertically. And so Notre Dame's perimeter pass attack has to be effective, not just with RPOs, although RPOs are an assist to an inexperienced, not as dominant run game. But it's also about being an effective perimeter passing team, period. Dropbacks, play action, screens, all of it. Because the better I am at attacking the sideline and attacking the perimeter, the less likely it is that you as the defensive coordinator can play with a reduced box to defend my run. Now, all of a sudden, we're starting to get numbers on you. It's 5-on-5 now. Now I feel a little bit better about the success of my running game to do that. And I think there's other things they can do, like two-back sets where they use one of the running backs to be effective in the pass game. There's all types of things like that they can do, Vince. And those are things you and I have talked a little bit about in the past, that the pass game is going to have to protect the run game a lot more than it has in the past.
It's funny. You gave a very detailed answer to that question. I was basically going to say I would love it if the running backs combined, between the two of them, combined rushing and receiving for 200 yards a game.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like with the way that they're getting the running backs involved now, they're an integral part of this offense. And so if they've got the ball in their hands, I almost consider that like one stat. So if they're combining for 200 yards, then I'd be pretty happy. That would make me very, very happy. I don't know that this offense is going to be set up to run for 200 yards a game. I just, with the way they're going to get it out to, like you said.
I think it can, but I think it's going to be different. I think it's going to be because it's going to look more like the 2017 offense, not from the scheme or style standpoint. Okay. I'm not talking offensive line wise. So please, when you hear me say 2017, please let me finish the explanation. I'm not saying they're going to look like they're going to run for 200, and maybe 2015 is a better example. And what I mean by that is I think there's going to be a lot more big runs this year because of the talent at running back.
Sure.
So, they may not have the snap after snap after snap success that they had. But I could see the yards being similar, but the yards per carry taking a huge jump.
I got you.
I would also encourage people, and Vince, I'm curious as to how you think about this. I would encourage people to, when you are evaluating a game, and if Notre Dame actually does stick to RPOs this year, we're going to break that down and give you the numbers every game. I would encourage you to always incorporate the success of the RPO throws into the success of the running game.
Sure.
An example to that would be, I believe it was I'm trying to remember which game it was in 2018, back when Notre Dame was actually doing a lot of RPOs.
When Book first took over.
Correct. When the offense was really rolling. And I believe it was Northwestern. It might have been Pitt. I can't remember which game it was, but there was a game where Notre Dame ran for not a ton of yards. I think it was Northwestern. But they completed like 8 or 9 RPO throws for over 100 yards. And it's like, well, that's a direct reflection of the run game because they're playing you to stop your run. You're pulling it, throwing out, and gaining 8-9 yards. There was a play against Northwestern, I believe it was, where it was like 3rd and 8, and they pulled it and threw a bubble screen to Cole Kmet and picked up a first down because Northwestern was so overplaying the running game. And in that game, Ian Book, you look at the Notre Dame rush for, I'm looking at it, 121 yards for 3.0 yards per carry against Northwestern. But Ian Book went 22 of 34 for 343 yards on a road win over a team that won the Big Ten West that year. So you're going to have to understand that the game has changed. And if you're going to properly evaluate how the success you had on designed running plays, you have to incorporate the RPO concepts off of it because those are a direct reflection of teams committing too many resources to stop the run. Jason Rose, I'm glad you asked this because Jason, you asked this question on a chat yesterday, and I asked you to bring it to the on the YouTube channel yesterday, and I asked you to bring it in the chat. I think this is a great question. Do you think Williams and Tyree could have a Javonte Williams and Michael Carter impact? And my answer is I sure hope so. And this is a perfect example to his question of why there is no excuse for Notre Dame not to be a dynamic offense this year without offensive linemen. North Carolina has a bunch of offensive linemen that are not going to be high draft picks. They didn't have a bunch of offensive linemen that were all Americans last year. The raw talent of their offensive line is not elite. They scheme their way into success, and they do things to allow their talented players to be effective. The RPO aspect of that offense is a huge, huge benefit to their run game. When you look at the success that Notre Dame or that North Carolina had running the football last year, we all think Kyron Williams is a great player. At least we should. I think he was great last year. Kyron Williams averaged 5.3 yards per carry. Michael Carter, who I don't think is as good as Kyron Williams, averaged 7.98 yards per carry last year. Javonte Williams averaged 7.26 yards per carry last year. Both in just 11 games rushed for at least 1,140 yards. That's what Javonte Williams had, and Michael Carter had 1,245 yards last season. Michael Carter also caught 25 passes. Javonte Williams caught 25 passes. So 50 catches between the two of them as well. And a lot of it is scheme-driven. It's tempo. It's aggressive. It's RPOs. It's what I like about North Carolina's run game is it's not just inside-outside zone and occasional counter. It's they're going to wrap, they're going to pull, they're going to kick out, they're going to do things to try to influence you. And when you wrap and pull, and I'm personally a zone guy. I prefer zones. But I think the teams that have been able to adopt zones but then implement some of the gap scheme stuff into it have been effective. And what that means is a gap scheme is essentially a zone is, we're going to work together in a combo. We've got this zone. We're blocking B gap up to the second level. Or depending on the call, you may be solo and then I'm working with the tackle. But we're working in tandem to occupy zones, and then the running back is going to have the freedom to make a read and then determine where he's going to go. Gap schemes are geared more towards creating a gap. So you may have a tackle down block to try to create the inside wall of a gap, and then you have a kick out that tries to set the outside wall of the gap, and then you might have a guy pulling inside to sort of be a lead blocker. It's a completely different type of system, and some of the advantages of that in a run game is the more that you do stuff where your linemen are going this way, the more flow you get from the defense, which then opens up those pull and throws. It also opens up even bigger cutback lanes at times if you have that kind of running back. If you're a vertical-oriented team, you can then get to the edge because there's things that teams will start kind of looking for the cutback, and then if you have the talent to outrun them to the sideline, which I think Notre Dame does, it just creates more vertical creases than what you see from a zone team. A zone works if you have really talented linemen, but I think when you have a less experienced or less talented line, the zone can be problematic when you're playing better teams, because now it's more about my guys versus your guys, where gap schemes can be, you can protect guys that aren't necessarily great one-on-one players by scheming them up. At least that's my impression of that. So that's why I talked earlier, Jason, about how I would like to see Notre Dame nuance their run game a little bit to create less pressure on just the lineman coming off and being dominant at the point of attack. And I think we'll see that. And then that creates opportunities for bigger plays in the RPO game as part of it. So do I think they could have that kind of impact? Absolutely. Maybe even more so. Do I think that's necessarily going to manifest itself in the same raw numbers as those guys? Maybe not, but I sure would like to see it. I just don't know if Notre Dame's going to be – I don't know if Notre Dame is going to be a team that is going to run for – kind of have the just the raw volume of plays and opportunities that North Carolina is going to bring at people. And so I think that's part of it too. And, so I could see a scenario in which their impact is certainly there, if not better, but I just don't know if it's going to look the same numbers wise. That's kind of where I'm getting at. And I think the tempo part of it that North Carolina does helps a lot too. And Notre Dame doesn't really do that. Well, same thing in this, what you're talking about, John, is if you're gonna have Lawrence Keys and Avery Davis and all these guys on the field, they have to be legitimate weapons to touch the ball and get the ball in space and make plays all the time. To where if you're running a buck sweep over here to the right, and you've got Keys, or you have Lindsey, or you have Tyree, or one of those playmakers running a bubble screen the opposite direction, that puts such a burden on that backside safety linebackers. Okay. And this is why the RPOs are so important. So what happens is if I'm running a buck sweep, and a buck sweep, if you want an example, is it's similar to if you remember the Josh Adams touchdown run against North Carolina, just think of the touchdown run that Chris Tyree had against North Carolina, against Clemson. So like an outside type of play where it's a hard flow, it's a fast flow. So outside zones and buck sweeps are considered fast flow plays, whereas an inside zone is a slow flow play, meaning you got to get out as a lineman, you got to go. Well, when that's happening, the guys that are reading run have to flow with it. Otherwise, you're gonna get sealed and get beat to the outside. So when you're also running an RPO backside, well, if you don't run an RPO backside, what that does is that allows once the backside safety and the backside linebacker declare run, they can then squeeze from their backside angles and take away any cutbacks. If you're running an RPO behind it, if that backside linebacker and backside safety read that buck sweep and they flow with that fast flow of the line and they move with it, then you pull and you're throwing that bubble screen or that slant or that outcut or that post route, you're now banging that behind them. And that's where the RPO does. And if you're successful with that, and they have to worry about Lindsey and they have to worry about Davis on those plays, because you've now out leveraged them on the bubble screen side, or the quick outside, or the quick game side, or the post side. If you've now out leveraged them or gotten to one-on-ones, now you're going to hurt them with that. So then what teams have to do is you'll have to say you're almost playing two types of defense. You're playing run over here and you're playing pass over here. Well, if they're having to respect that bubble screen in the backside post, now you've lost your cutback defenders. And so that is where you can then see those cutback runs to where safeties are now having to squeeze from depth because they had to first defend the run. And now you've got a free safety 10 yards downfield trying to tackle Kyron Williams or Chris Tyree. It's not happening. And so those are why those things are so important. And so, you may run a run play, and they flow backside, and you throw a bubble screen that goes for 20 yards. You say, that's a pass play. Not really, and not in my book. It's, to me, as an offensive coach and as you as a defensive coordinator, we're both looking at it as an outside run play. That's how we're defining it, because that's how you defend it, and that's how you execute it. And so that's why I say those things have to be incorporated. But that's why I emphasize RPOs so much have to be a part of what they do, because to me, that's going to be more effective than trying to get your backside receiver to hopefully chase a safety downfield and make a block on them in space. I think you're going to have more efficient and effective success running those RPOs backside. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that I kind of addressed the comment you made, which I thought was a good one.